I wouldn't think I need a microphone here. Can everybody hear me fine? Okay, perfect. It's a little wild for me. It's my first time being in a college classroom environment in several years, and I'm getting a little bit of PTSD from it, I'm not gonna lie. But for those of you who don't know, my name is Brandon Herrera, and I am currently running for Congress in Texas District 23 against the incumbent Rhino, Tony Gonzalez. Yeah, no, I'm here to answer your questions. Realistically, I wanted to come up and show face with you guys and talk about why it's important to be involved in politics, especially when you're talking about Republicans. Here in the state of Texas, you know, there's plenty of Republicans, but there's a lot of Republicans that have gotten away with being bad Republicans just because they have an R in front of their name. Those are the people that we absolutely have to primary. We have to hold bad politicians accountable and put our money where our mouth is and get them out. Well, my favorite part about that is that all we have to do is talk about their voting record. He's got a bad record. He voted for Biden's gun control after Uvalde when it became politically inconvenient for him to no longer support the Second Amendment. He's fought Chip Roy and other Republicans on actual border patrol solutions while he is, gallivanting around with Elon, pretending that he's some savior to the border, when in reality he's voted against these things. He's really come out against other hardcore conservatives on border issues. These are things that we can all point out, and the Republican Party, especially after the censure vote, doesn't really need much help in being reminded why he's just not a good vote.
Yeah. To address that situation based on border policies?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually planning on going out there in a few days, if not a week or two, and actually talking with the guys on the ground, the Border Patrol guys, and see what kind of resources that they're lacking. These are guys that are underfunded, and not only are they underfunded, the federal government is actively working against them to prevent them from having the resources they need. And I'd like to see the ways that we can figure that out funding-wise. Figure out how to, if the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI are spending so many millions of dollars trying to spy on law-abiding Americans, or people like us, really everybody in this room, especially if you're in a room with me, they're spending money making sure that, they keep an eye out on you and your search history. Sorry about that. So figuring out how we can allocate some of those funds to do things that actually defend the citizens of this country, I think would be a great place to start. So that's a two-part. So one, I think that the overall term mental health is a slippery slope when it comes to First Amendment, Second Amendment, or really any rights that are, first of all, natural rights, provided by God and then just secured by the government. They're not from the government. So what is a mental health issue? So is that just, violent schizophrenia, or does that include maybe PTSD? Does that include an ADHD diagnosis? These are not things that you want to give up to the government. They should not be deciding these things. The other part of that question is whether or not background checks are even effective. The reason why straw purchases are such a big deal is because it's an easy workaround on the system, which is getting guns in the hands of felons, which, by the way, most guns that are used in crimes, I think it's just over 50%. Most guns that are used in homicides, crimes, murder, theft, whatever, armed robbery, are not obtained legally anyway. They're either, it's either a straw purchase, or the majority of them are just stolen. So how do you get a background check on a stolen firearm? So these are things that I'm not necessarily sure more stringent checks are the solution. I think that law-abiding citizens are the only ones that end up actually paying in the long run.
We know that you have particular PR and things like that, but you don't have any official federal office holdings from what I'm aware.
No, none at all, thank God.
At the end of the day, you have your constitutionalism, and on top of that, your First and Second Amendment absolutists. But what other principles can we trust you to run on that represent us as people?
I'm one of the few people that's willing to get up on a stage and say, I fucking hate the government. So, a good rule of thumb for me is that if it grants more power to the federal government, I am automatically against it. There might be a few small exceptions, but they would have to be very small and very specific. So I actually have a lot of friends that are currently in Ukraine, and it's an interesting situation. I think everybody can agree that the invasion of Ukraine was illegal. Putin is an out-of-control dictator that is trying to basically print his legacy before he ends up clocking out. Where I think the nuance is lost is whether or not it's the United States' job to single-handedly fund the defense of Ukraine. The biggest problem I started to have after paying attention to the conflict pretty closely was just how much money the United States was spending, especially in comparison to the rest of Europe. So if you're talking about the rest of NATO, the United States is footing the vast majority of the bill. And it's starting to turn into a complete proxy war against against Russia by the United States. And that's where I think we're going to have a major problem. That's when it becomes not only an escalation of World War III, but also just the fact that the United States is spending hundreds of billions of dollars on defending another country's borders right after we decided that $8 billion was too much to spend on our own. That's the biggest problem I have with that. I think the easier thing is to say what I consider to be unreasonable spending. Like, I don't think we should be spending hundreds of millions of dollars on educating Pakistani youths on LGBTQ studies. Hundreds of millions of dollars would go a long way toward border security, I think. And it's just finding these little pieces of fat that not enough people care enough to leave their DC brunches and actually go fight against. And I think that's a major problem. Sir, Mr. Donut Operator joins the stage. Yeah. We were talking about this earlier on today. He just showed me that Kevin McCarthy was ousted as the Speaker of the House, which is absolutely fantastic. I don't think much has surprised me in that way. The only thing that surprised me was the fact that it happened in the first place and she thought that was a good idea. Is everybody familiar with that situation? Or? Okay.
No idea.
No idea? Okay, so basically the governor of New Mexico basically declared gun violence a public health crisis. You know, abusing COVID laws. Nobody saw that coming. But what essentially happened is she declared carry, even legal carry, with a license to carry, illegal in certain counties, including Albuquerque, the capital. And so there was mass civil disobedience. People did not comply with it. The sheriff department, I believe it was the sheriff, said that they were not going to enforce it, and was later struck down by a judge, which was absolutely going to happen no matter what, because that was rampantly unconstitutional, not only just on a federal level, but on a state level. And so I was very pleased to see that that happened the way it absolutely should have. But she's doubling down on it, saying that she had the authority to do it, which she's absolutely batshit crazy. Oh, absolutely against. There's not a scenario, and that's one of the problems I had with Tony Gonzalez, is he voted for a bill that funded state red flag laws. And that's something that I absolutely cannot abide by. Not only is it a First Amendment violation, it's a Fourth Amendment violation, a Second Amendment violation, and on top of that, it's just bad legislation that allows for spite swattings and a bunch of things where, you know, there are instances with red flag laws, and I think it was Maryland and New Jersey and a few other cases where people have been killed from authorities coming to take guns unlawfully.
Evil as abortion.
Yeah.
Why should we just leave it up to these? Why do we chalk it up to these like silly libertarian stuff like states' rights and federalism?
Because it's not silly, it's the Constitution.
Well,
So the Constitution
killing hundreds of thousands of unborn children. Who cares about the Constitution at that point?
That is a dangerous position to take.
Now we're coming to abortion.
Who cares about the Constitution is a slippery slope, because the Constitution is,
So the Constitution
well, the Constitution is the only document, people don't really get to see this. And I'll give you an answer that you like a little bit better than that in a second, but we should be very careful about throwing away the Constitution, because the Constitution is the only piece of paper that separates the government from a gang that just happens to have territorial control over the country, which, you know, they don't make the distinction easy themselves sometimes, but I'd like to defund it. I'd like to defund it. The most Soviet shit that's come out of the United States in the last 100 years is deciding that we should all hand over our education to the government. It's a terrible idea. It should have never been implemented, and we're reaping the rewards of allowing that to happen. So I like a lot of different policies as far as school choice and things like that that are bringing us away from federally funded education systems.
What resources are available to us?
So we will have stuff available pretty soon on the website. It's BrandonHerreraForCongress.com, but I'd also, in the next couple of months, we'll be looking for people like block walkers and just really volunteers that are going to be helping us really just get this bad Republican out. I think that's going to be, if I can make his life more difficult, that's going to be, it's going to make me smile in the morning. Well, sorry for the watch lists, guys, but I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure talking with you guys.